Good morning, all of you. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, standing in the midst of such illustrious people. And as you can see, the panel has been very, selectively chosen. We have almost 3 generations sitting here. So we have somebody who has probably just missed out the Second World War, who is Larry. Then we have Krishnan, who is somewhere my age, probably has seen the pre-liberalization and post-liberalization. And we have Ritu, who probably is reaping the benefits of liberalization. Now, I would like to, just bring to your notice that this gentleman was actually introducing me, Adarsh Ayyappan. He happens to be a person who knows at this young age some 11 languages, and he can speak fluently. So somewhere when he was talking of innovation and enthusiasm, it struck me like this guy is pretty enthusiastic. He definitely has enthusiasm for something. That is why he has picked up so many languages. And I envy him, honestly. Coming back to the overarching theme that we have for this conference is inspired leadership, the key to turbulent times. Now this is something which is a very common topic nowadays. You go anywhere and you'll find that the general topic of discussion is, we are having so much of problem, economic recession and turbulence. Frankly speaking, if you look into it, as a society, human beings have been facing these turbulent times all through. Be it the First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, the 2008 recession, all sorts of terrorism and everything. These are all turbulent times. And, we had the resilience. The society had the resilience to come out of that. And honestly speaking, the resilience was because of the innovation that was taking place, and this innovation was being led by inspired leaders. The leaders who are trying to see to it that yes, if there are people who have enthusiasm in them, if they are nurtured well, then probably these turbulent times can be weathered very easily. I was reading a small book which was written by the Chinmaya Mission, and there was a small article written by one Mr. Thampuran. He is from the Chinmaya Institute of Management. He said that when there is a war in a country, every individual in fact puts in his energies together to see to it that how they can save the country. Now war is a turbulent time, and all of us, we start associating ourselves, we align our values with a higher purpose. And we see to it that the nation has to be protected, and they align themselves toward the higher purpose. If you look into today's time, where we are primarily talking of economic recession, though the turbulent times are not just economic in nature, they are social and organizational and individual turbulence also. There is a lot of conflict within individuals also. What am I doing? How should I actually raise my game? These are all symptoms of turbulent times. If you see, this particular gentleman said that just like in a war, when everybody, right from the lowest section of the society to the highest section of the society, we all align ourselves. Professionals, farmers, engineers, doctors, all align ourselves how to protect our country from these invaders, how to see to it that this, probably the turbulence which has generated, how we can fight it out. They all align themselves. And when they come together, the impact is staggering. Now, microcosm of this sort of situation is seen in an organization. Whereas the organization is reeling under pressure because of various reasons. If all the people within the organization, if they join hands together, probably I think the impact would again be staggering. And we have seen such things happen in companies like IBM. The most important resource is human resource in any organization. And incidentally, that is one resource which is the least utilized. We just utilize part of that particular human resource. During these turbulent times, I think we should raise our game and we should see to it that how we can leverage this particular human resource that we have. We have Mr. Krishnan, who has been in Dabur for a long period of time. They have a manpower strength of somewhere around 6 to 7,000 people globally. And they are also facing the same sort of challenges in today's environment as any other company. We have Ritu Malhotra, who is heading HR of Canon, which is a global corporation again, that probably they would also be facing all sorts of challenges in different parts of the world. And we have Larry, who has been consulting all sorts of organizations. He is a fantastic individual who really understands the meaning of higher purpose and how the body, mind, and the soul can be put together to be peace with the environment. And he has done some stellar work in that, which he will be sharing. I would like to start with Mr. Krishnan. If you can probably share how in his organization he has been able to foster this sort of the ability of the human resource to come out with innovative practices by fostering innovation, by fostering enthusiasm, and taking on this challenge of turbulent times. It would be very interesting to know what were the challenges before these turbulent times, what did he do now when the turbulent times have really set in. And it would be very interesting to learn from him. Dabur has been one of the most brilliant Indian multinational companies, I'll call it. They have in fact faced all sorts of pressure from all sorts of corners, but they have stood tall. And he has been a party to all these wonderful experiences. So if you can share with us some of the things that you have done and how he has been instrumental in fostering enthusiasm within the young leaders in his organization.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya. It's a matter of great privilege to come to soil, and we have been consortium partners from day one. And every time I come here, I see more as a learning experience for myself. Because in the corporate world, you're trying to execute your own roles, jobs, responsibilities, and though we try our best, but to keep ourselves updated. But coming and talking to young people and see how they think differently from the way we think, I think itself is a great learning. So thank you once again. Thanks for this opportunity. And a bit of a sore throat, so if I keep clearing my throat, please excuse me for that. Just to respond to what Professor Bhattacharya said, I'll just take a minute to go a bit of the history of Dabur. Dabur is a 127-year old organization. Was run by the promoters till about 1995. Okay. Somewhere the promoters felt that if this organization has to grow, it has to be handed over to professionals. So in 1995, they had the courage to step back. They brought in McKinsey as a consultants and tried to find out a way to do this organization and induct professionals. To their credit, the first wave of professionalization didn't go over here. In fact, the people abroad, the business actually started doing worse than what was doing earlier. Of course, they did that as a learning. They didn't jump into the management again. They again saw what went wrong, modified things. And again they were, I'm just giving you the background because to try something new, not to be worried by setbacks and have the courage to see what went wrong and do it again. Okay. I think that is somewhere one of the core things in innovation. Okay. Subsequently, the second wave of professionalization did very well. Just to give a bit of a data, Dabur reached 1,000 crore in the year 2000, and I told you it's a 127-year-old organization. Today, as I'm standing here, March financial year closing, we should probably be closing 7,300 crores. So in 13 years, it has grown 7.5 times. Because the promoters felt that we need to get professionally qualified managers to run the business. So again, going back, if you believe in something very deeply and you feel that's the right thing to do, and you will stay on your course, despite the setbacks you face, you will eventually get success. That is one of the core ingredients you need to have for innovation. Because when you try something new, you'll be challenged, you'll be pushed back, you'll be told it will not work. But you should have that power of conviction and a passion. I mean, this cannot be taught in any school. It's something you need to start. In fact, when people ask me what it is to work in Davos, I just say very simple word. It's a very entrepreneurial culture. And I say it's an entrepreneurial culture. What it essentially means is, I mean, this is the fourth organization I work. And what is unique about this organization is nobody stops you from doing it. Okay? There are systems, there are processes, there are results to be achieved. But if you have a great idea which you want to implement, yes, the management committee will question you, they will challenge you, they just test two things. How passionate about the whole idea are you? How much do you believe in? Okay. Secondly, what they try to say is, obviously any idea involves a certain amount of investment resources. How much of their homework have you done? How much have they gone deep into it? How much of ring fencing and plan Bs and plan Cs you've done, so that they don't want to jump off the cliff and die. They just want to be sure that you will at least land up with some broken bones and nothing major will happen. So nobody stops you from taking this. They only want to know that you are not going to sink the ship by taking this. Okay. So it's one of the brilliant organizations and nobody stops you from doing it. It's very entrepreneurial. Every function runs it like he's running your own shop. So if you have an idea, nobody comes in. You need to be sure what you're saying. You need to be sure what is going to work. You need to think through everything. So I would say this entrepreneurial culture is something which fosters a fundamental way. In fact, in my presentation, there's a small video by my CEO. It's old, but I've just taken the relevant point. So it's an organization which allows you to question the status quo. It allows you to ask questions. If you think that's a better way of doing it, nobody stops you. It's an organization that's also extremely consumer focused. In fact, some of the cases that I'll be sharing. We take a lot of effort in figuring out what the consumers want, how their needs are changing, what solutions are they seeking, and our offerings in line. So consumers typically have three kinds of needs. There's a spoken need. Like for example, when you go and buy a car, let me start the unspoken need. When you go and buy a car, there's an unspoken need. Okay, you expect that when you start driving it, the door will not start rattling. Okay, you will assume that the radiator water will not start leaking, which has happened in ambassadors long years ago. So there's a basic need which you assume. They are unspoken. Second is of course the spoken needs. What the mileage I'm going to get, what is going to be the resale cost, every service that I do, how much it's going to cost me. Third is the what we call the delight needs. Something I wish it would happen, but today it's not available. Okay? I think someone like Steve Jobs was very good in playing the delight space. He could see eventually what the consumer is going to move towards, and therefore come up with solutions. Okay? So at least we try to see that we don't score a zero, at least in the spoken and unspoken. Delight is difficult, but we are trying to go towards that. We spend a lot of time listening to consumers. We revisit our solutions, products, and propositions very, very closely. We do competitive benchmarking. We spend a lot of investment on consumer research. So we are always trying to see what the consumer wants now and how its needs are likely to emerge going forward. We also look at our consumers from various perspectives. Like people like you who typically are called Gen Y, people who are who probably born in the last millennium, or like I have a son who is about 20 years old. And the way he talks and the way he behaves and the way he communicates is very different. In fact, he once asked me a very interesting question, which was my first insight into digital marketing. Like all teenagers, he used to be a health freak and he used to go to the gym and he used to play basketball, and you become business conscious, very careful about how much sugar you take and things like that. So we have a sugar-free juice called Active, and he used to have it. He one day told me, "You work for this organization, so I know Active." He said, but my life revolves around Facebook and all these kind of things. So I am not present with it. If you were not in Dabur, I don't think I would have ever had this problem. I don't watch TV. I watch the newspaper on the net. I don't read the newspaper. I get whatever I want on the digital world. So I was telling my marketing head, there's an insight, and this was 4 or 5 years. So and slowly we started getting a lot of feedback that our digital marketing strategy is not where it should be because the Gen Y is only present there. I mean, when there's a commercial which comes on TV, he either goes to call his friend or go and pick up a snack. He's not interested in what is coming on the TV commercial. It's a break. So in fact, there's a joke in marketing that a TV commercial is a break to the viewer to do what he wants. Okay. So we listen to consumers, we see what they want. There's a culture of entrepreneurial listening, there's a culture of risk taking, and there are rewards and recognition mechanisms. Like in the competency framework, the visual competency framework we developed about 2 years ago, thinking innovatively was one of the competencies. We ensured it is there. We worked with every renowned HR consulting firm to develop this. That competency framework has a 360-degree feedback which all managers go through every 18. And the score you're getting on innovation is very closely watched by all of them. Then the same innovation is also into our career development centers, in our appraisal process. So, and there are rewards and recognition mechanisms. Like we have one rewards and recognition mechanism called applause. 2 years back, we created an award category called Eureka. So anyone who does something different, not thought of before, he's entitled for a Eureka award. So you align your reward, recognition, the pat on the back mechanisms with such that you reinforce innovative behaviors. So this is what we broadly do, and I hope it sums up whatever.
Yeah, I just want one more thing from you. When you talk of inspired leadership, which leads or which does, fostering of enthusiasm within the young leaders, what is it that you do probably in your organization so that the senior leader may develop this ability to in fact identify people with enthusiasm and fostering it so that it grows?
Look, one of the things that we have started doing is, as I told you, one is a common direction to all leaders and managers is that if there is a newcomer in the team, either from outside or a management review person, if he's asking questions and he's challenging what we've been doing, please listen. There's no holy cow in this organization. Okay? If you think you have a professionally sound viewpoint on an issue, please talk to me. I'm here open business. The second issue is that recently we realized that a phenomenon like Steve Jobs happens once in a lifetime. Okay? But there are enough and more people who have brilliant ideas. And when they discuss, then ideas become better. You can build on other things. So we have started, earlier we used to create focus group discussions and things like that. Now we have started IT enabling the group. Like our current intranet is undergoing a major redesign. So we consciously spoke to the IT head to ensure that we can, suppose there's a cross-functional team who wants to, so any person who is working on an issue can create an e-cross-functional team. He can invite people who want to be on there. And you can have a continuous dialogue even when you're not in the office. In fact, one of the things we recently did was, many of you might be aware, there's a platform called Yammer. Okay. Yammer is a place, in the basic, it has got a free registration. The only thing it requires is common domain names like Gmail, Yahoo, and all do not accept. If you have a corporate email ID, like if students of soil, actually are working on a project, you can create a Yammer group. Okay? So like you do in Facebook, you can chat, and there's an app available for smartphones. So 24/7, you can be communicating with each other on the project that you're working on. So the idea is to kind of co-create ideas and keep building it and refining it to a higher level. The idea is keep the conversation going. If you have a thought, if you have an idea, keep the conversation going. Okay. You may not be able to implement everything right away. Maybe it involves too much of investment, organizational time. Break it up. Maybe I will cover 5 kilometers this year. I'll cover another 10 kilometers next year. Maybe the organization doesn't have the resources to invest everything upfront. So do it in pieces. But keep the conversation going and don't let the idea die. So these are some of the things we do. And there is, in fact, when a newcomer comes to the organization, many of them are actually pretty lost. Because in the organization, there seems to be a lot of commotion happening. So the typical thing I tell them is that, look at this organization as a friendly jungle. Okay, there are various trees, shrubs, pathways, various things. So if you just sit outside the gate and wonder, you think you're lost. But what you should do is get on a vehicle, start driving it. You'll find enough people, if you ask for directions, seek information, they will be more than happy to chat with you. So one of the things they have noted is that people who come from very processized, very tech-related organizations, they slightly struggle in that system. Because the culture is entrepreneurial, the culture is connect and develop, the culture is discover, the culture is ask questions. But in a non-threatening way. That is not to say that what you have been doing so far is nonsense. But tell them that, look, this is a great thing that you're doing, but I think we can do something better. So this is what we try to foster going forward, and we spend a lot of time in trying to culturalize a person when he joins the organization, whether it's management trainings. For management trainings, we run a program called Campus to Corporate. It's called C2C. It is a transition program we run to help you move from a campus environment to a corporate. Similarly, when a lateral person joins, also a lot of time and effort is spent in trying to understand the DNA of the organization and how to be successful. So if you have fundamental inquisitiveness, and leaders are encouraged you to ask questions, and nobody stops you from wanting to try out different things, and something different is rewarded and acknowledged, I think a culture and enthusiasm starts developing by itself. Because there is freedom of intellectual choice. Okay? So that is what I would say is fundamentally required in fostering innovation in an organization.
That was a great session by Krishna. And you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I have, but actually I've covered most of it.
Most of it is just covered.
So that was fantastic. In fact, there were some case studies which I had. If there is time, we can catch up today.
Yeah, okay. And the most interesting part is how a 127-year-old company, it's really, really old. And predominantly, I would call it a proprietor-driven company at one point of time is now a 100% professional company. How this change has happened, and you can very well imagine the ecosystem was also changing at a rapid pace. So keeping pace with the ecosystem, surviving the onslaught from all these multinational companies, I think probably you have been here before Hindustan Liver even entered. I think Hindustan Liver came in 1900.
Yeah, in fact, I'll just take one. The biggest challenge we have from a business point of view, we literally land up competing in every FMCG company in this country. Because we are into shampoos, which is essentially the forte of Unilever and P&G. We are in the hair oil, which is essentially a battle between us and Marico. We are into home care, essentially we land up competing with Reckitt, with Sara Lee. We are into juices. We are though there are enough and more multinational players, but we hold the market share with 52%. We are the number one player. And then we are into oral care. After Colgate and Unilever, we are the third largest player in the oral care category. We are into health supplements like honey. We are the single largest branded honey in the country. The honey category itself is, I think, about 300 crores. So we land up. So our biggest problem is that we are attacked by every FMCG in the country. Everybody competes. It's not like a Colgate Palmolive who only need to take care of the people. So our competition, probably our competitive scenario forces us to be like this. Because if you're not nimble, if you're not thinking fast on our feet, if we don't outthink our competitors, they will eat us up. Because many of them are transnational corporations which have deep pockets. And we don't have a godfather sitting in Europe or US who's willing to keep sending truckloads of dollars to invest in the emerging market. We don't have that. So we need to fend for ourselves. Probably that is the context.
And in fact, very smartly, Mr. Krishnan has hidden the fact that his own department, HR, has been doing fantastic in Dabur. They have one of the lowest attrition rate in the FMCG industry. And in spite of the fact that turbulent times have witnessed huge amount of attrition. I think Lava has been one of the most stable. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there has been one of the lowest attrition rates.
I think, yeah. So I think I'm running a 10 year. We have probably lost 3 or 4 managers so far. That would be unit.
So that is absolutely a minuscule number leaving, and that too they would be leaving for the very first regions.
Yeah.
So in fact, they have been able to foster somewhere down the line this sort of innovation, and the culture has been created so that people stick on, hang on. They know that this organization is going to support us. So this is something which is great. And you will have some more questions. Which I have a small question and answer session also subsequently. Then probably you can ask questions to him. In the meantime, I would like Ritu to come in because she is a product of the IQ-dominated world. She probably started her career after 1991. So that was a liberalized world, and she understands purely IQ. But since she's in HR, she would have realized that probably somewhere down the line, IQ itself does not really matter. Somewhere down the line, the heart matters. You have to reach out to people. You have to empathize. And I think she has one of the toughest jobs. Being an international company, there are cultural issues also which she has to address. And I think she can probably share some of her experience with us.
Good morning. You're right. Younger generation as compared to some of my colleagues in the office itself. So I have some experience in social work, human relations. I continue to be a learning enthusiast. So I understand. I today learned Barry is from a psychology background, and I was very interested to spend some more time with him. So I'm trying to get a bit of more understanding of that field by pursuing PhD in that area. Canon is my third job. I worked in 2 companies earlier, and I joined Canon in 2005 as a manager, and I've been heading the HR and CSR for 2 years now. Well, there's more to me than my work. So that's more about me. I'm married for 10 years, and I have a girl who's growing up faster than I think she should. So her name is Anya. And when I'm not learning from her, there's not a single day when I don't learn from a child as young as 4-year-old. I spend some time with it. So that's about me. I represent Canon. We are globally a really old company. We started in 1935. We've been in India for about 15-16 years now. We are more than 1,000 staff. There's something bit about Canon globally. We spend about approximately 10% of our revenue annually on R&D. We continuously for past 1 decade, we are either among the top 3 companies in the world who register the number of patents registered in a year. If you count that, we probably rank number 2 or number 3 in the last 10 years. Number 1 has always been unshakable IBM. Number 2 and number 3 has been at times switched between Microsoft and Canon. And just 1 year we came to number 4 when Samsung few years has become extremely aggressive into R&D and investing a lot. So for us, innovation is a fundamental DNA. And innovation for us is a culture. It's not just about creating fantastic products. There's a lot more that goes in running organizations and running creating lives. So that's what I represent. We are, our corporate philosophy, and I feel very passionate about it, and I like to talk about it wherever I can. Our corporate philosophy is Kyosei. It's a Japanese word which means living and working together for common good. What we do is we create a range of aspirational products in printing and photo in India. Some few people know we are also into a space called medical equipment, which is not very soon going to enter India, and semiconductors, industrial products which are not there in India as of now. but medical equipment or not. So we shared something between me and Maggie in the morning about how Canon is beyond printing and cameras. So while I represent Canon, I also represent so-called the younger generation. And one of the things that I've always faced is being the youngest. It has its own aspects of going through a stressful period. So I've been the youngest manager, I've been probably being the youngest entrant into the senior management team. It's very, very stressful. And I think one thing that's kept me going was I've always been a learning enthusiast. And how I define a learning enthusiast as somebody who has the humility and the passion to learn at all times. So I've always been someone who's wanting to look at the opportunities that the work or the life presents to create successes and to face the failures and overcome them. So when I joined Canon as a young manager in 2005, I was very intrigued by Canon culture. It seemed it's very, very different from anything else that I have known either my friends working in or my other two companies where I've been. Very, very different. So I thought, let me spend some time. So everywhere I went, I had people who had spent years and years in Canon globally or in India. So I was once interacting with an old and a wise person from my company, our erstwhile CEO, Konishi-san, and we were in a conversation with a few of other younger managers. So here was this young manager who asked him, what are the 3 important attributes to become a successful leader? So he says, well, as for me, the number 1 is to have a good mind. Second is the openness to learn. I thought it was something very interesting. He said, the ability to do routine things over and over again without getting bored. So I was wondering, why would that be? Why would a CEO or anybody else would want to do these routine things over and over again without getting bored with this? So he says, well, let's see it this way. How do you think a sportsman live? And how do you think a sportsman live? Does the job description of a sports person ever changes in his lifetime? It probably remains the same. So what do? They just practice till they get good. And and we just got into a conversation and we spoke of J.R.D. Tata, who once said, "Vision without actions are nothing but dreams, and action without vision is merely passing time. And when you combine both action and vision, you transform the world." And we realized that knowledge is not equal to competence. We learned that students don't learn much by just sitting in the classrooms. They must talk about it. They must practice it. They must experiment with it. They just reflect about it. So, it's all about practicing and doing. And 3 biggest learning that came to us when we wanted to tread the path of innovation and creating that culture was that people don't learn or change or transform or create something, breakthrough movements for themselves or for others, till the time they are self-directed. So they must be autonomy. So we like to be self-directed as human beings. Number 2 was mastery. We like to be good at what we do. And third is we do something when we have the bigger purpose. And that's probably quite in line with what we have in Canon called Sanjay Spirit. And that's what guides us. So our Sanjay Spirit says self-awareness, self-motivation, self-management. And that's what really, really guides us at any given point of time. And these learnings came to us so-called turbulent times. So in Japan, let me share. So it went through a bit of ups and downs. So from 85 to 91, we had a bubble economy. Everything was going great. Then came the lost decade, and then the big drop in GDP happened at that time, and upward move started. But with the Lehman shock, it just couldn't last. So Canon started thinking, what do we do to overcome these market realities? And the situation in India wasn't, very different. So we went through our turbulent times as well. And we realized culture when everybody thinks and wants to transform and create a better tomorrow for themselves and for them. So we tried various things. We went to classrooms trying to teach people innovation, creativity, thinking through problem solving. We did experiential programs. We did a lot of on-the-job stuff, telling people to experiment. We created online forums, let people put in their suggestions, let the suggestions be picked up from other process owners or the people who can make those changes. Let's create cross-functional teams of people. Here's a great idea. Let small group of people cross-functionally get together across levels, work on those ideas, present their proposals to the management, and we did all that. And we realized that unless people face problems in their real life, they won't know how to solve them. So one of the most successful initiatives that started in Japan and then it got moved to some other countries and to India a few years back, actually not a few years, quite some time back now, was a revolutionary program which we called as MPR. MPR is, the full form is Management Process Reengineering. In India it came in 2010 and it is really a very, very simple concept and it's something that I would be passionate about and want to share with all of you. Very, very simple concept, but when implemented, it just produces extraordinary results. And the purpose of MPR is really to align people towards shared purpose. So we can't do anything unless we have a shared purpose. It is to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. Knowledge is not competence. It does not create results. It does not create transformations. It doesn't mean that even if we create exceptional ideas, they will get implemented. So we need to get people to form a habit of bringing in improvements, executing, and also innovating in the process. And we all say that there are two areas. How do we make something happen? A theoretical area and a practical area. Theory is all about knowledge, skills, policy, strategy. That's a theoretical bit. MPR is, for us, the practical bit. It is to put the knowledge that we have learned into actions with a change in mindset. And the change in mindset for us is the most important because whenever things go wrong, it's always about others. So we don't end up taking accountability for when things go wrong. So it's always about the blame game. And we said we have to take responsibility and we have to shift the accountability from others' issues to our issues. And if we don't create that change in the mindset of people, we probably won't achieve anything. So what we did was, it started a pilot project. We got a group of, and the pilot project became a model thereafter. So what we do is we get a team of, let's say, 5 managers or 5 professionals into a team, and we do a very small session, a short session on MBO, Management by Objectives, and we follow it up with something called a fact paper exercise. So a fact paper exercise is nothing but a big brown sheet of paper which kind of visualizes. I'll take a minute more to explain to you and then show it to everyone. The fact paper is really, the purpose of fact paper is that, in a sales organization or any company, we have a lot of big objectives, target setting, and we do a lot of results. So a lot of reports will come out. But in between is a black box. We don't know if we've got fantastic results, why we got fantastic results. If we are not doing well in some area, why we are not doing that. So it's probably a black box. So we realized the first thing that we have to do is to make this process visible. Because what we cannot see, we cannot change. And that's when we introduced something called a PDCA. And we just added an O to it to make it OPDCA, Objective, Plan, Do, Check and Act. So this was in a very, very innovative manner, the way we implemented it and how it brought results for us. So each manager who was in this classroom would prepare a fact paper based upon this OPDCA. So you could illustrate this fact paper. How it looks like is something like this. So it would have on top the OPDCA written, and it would have on the column here the various position holders in the same function who would kind of have a function would come in, and then people would put in actual evidences of how their objectives are, how they plan, how they do, how they check, and how they act. So it's like a visualization of the entire management process. So there is nothing but a black box. So this is how people would do it. So the visualization is the key. The visualization was what people realized was a time of error. Because the minute they would put this, they found many issues. The issues were in the form of, for example, the linkage between the goals was not clear, the purpose wasn't shared, etc. And after people would do their OBDC, and other core managers in the room would come and put these yellow posted slips on it showing where are gaps. And the paper would be full of gaps. And these gaps could be very, very common gaps. So, there are ambiguity in roles, there's no deadline, objective seems like empty slogans, plans are very vague, abstract, no checking mechanisms. There's a gap, as simple as a gap between the fact paper of a manager and a subordinate. And it seems like two different functions. And we realize, how transformations or innovations, etc. would happen if this basic fundamental block is missing. So what we expected them to do then, after doing, and people really call this an eye-opener because it just changes the way they solve things. So what we said was recreate a new management process. So what you need to do is, you have to create a unified and a shared plan. So a domestic company like Canon India makes a long-term, a mid-term plan, it gets translated into a yearly or term plan, and then a monthly plan for plans. And then each person translates it into something called a daily schedule with milestones and their own goals kind of program. So, and this plans are so detailed. It's about why, what, who, where, gets into all the 5 whys and hows of it. And when we do the objective setting, we of course look at benchmarks, we look at what we expect to do, the competitive basket, the comparative basket, all those aspects. So that's the process that we asked them to start. And then we said, share the plans. So, if you don't share plans, people really don't know what the other person is up to. It's really like a blind or an empty box for another person. So we say, what we cannot see, we cannot change. So we have to see, and we have to see the same picture. So this fact sheet was like a visualization of what everybody could see, and then create a shared purpose, and then can move ahead. So the managers or the team members don't wonder, well, what's the other person up to? Maybe he's just trying to create something revolutionary in his own mind, but he doesn't get the support of others because others don't know what's happening. So once we put an O and a P, then you do execution. So there is actually a detailed sheet which exists for people which just says, have you done it or not done it? It's as simple as that. There's nothing else in execution. So in the 2 column, the evidences that you would see is this action plan sheet here or not? And this is available to everybody. So what comes out are gaps. There are gaps that would come out between O and P, between T and D, between T and actual results. And what needs to be then taken care of, what to fix and what not to fix. So then comes the entire aspect of how do we do the root cause analysis, what are the new ideas that we need to bring in, how do we implement short-term, long-term aspects coming. So this way we have designed the MPR project is for us 3 phases. The clarification phase for these 5 people who come in the room, there's a construction phase and there's an implementation phase. So clarification phase is really about, the change in mindset. So they understand what's a problem. They realize the need for the change. And then it comes to the next phase, which is the construction phase. Now can we have a shared purpose? Now can we make our detailed plans which everybody understands? And now can we create our milestones and then we create norms for working? And then comes the next step wherein, okay, we know what we need to do. Now can we attempt to implement it? And when they implement it, there are some hurdles. So how do we overcome those hurdles? So this process goes for 6 months for every single team. So they keep going back, coming in into this room and reconstruct together purpose of doing it over 6 months is to really have a change in mindset and make it a habit. And if you don't keep repeating something, it will just not happen. So that's for us, becomes institutionalized and becomes a continuous process in recreating the hope, which may be, for us something new or something, a breakthrough movement for either individual or the country. And for us, this process would have never been successful had it not been, a top management commitment. So it was not unusual for our CEO to just walk into a room when MPR is happening with all the balls being plastered by fact papers and coming in and looking at fact papers and giving his own comments of where does he think, how people can value add, etc. There was a clear commitment that came from him. So he tells us now that if we go and now sell it to our partners and make them follow MPR, because if we grow, they grow, we grow. So, and to our customers. And that's probably the next step that we would engage into. Now, all these improvement areas that come in as a result of these gaps, small or big, in whatever size, they really get captured on an online forum we have. So we have an online forum with various modules, and there is one forum called Tyson, in which these ideas get posted, cross-functional teams then further take it forward if there is a need to engage cross-functional within a function team. And we have really seen some fantastic results. We have seen some fantastic results in terms of our business. We have seen, really good results in terms of our people aspect. Our attrition has been in a single digits, consistently. It used to be, our attrition used to be extremely high. It's just really gone down consistently. Our employee satisfaction index, and it's not happened through a black box. We know what made it happen and what did not make it happen. Customer results, and that just gets reflected in how we. So essentially, it really comes down to, I'm sure some of you would have seen this, it really comes down to being on a flow. So for every individual, what we say, and of course there's a skill level and there's a challenge level. And for you, it's important for a person to be continuously in the flow, maximum number of times, to be able to create those breakthrough movements for themselves and for others. And if one is not on the flow, then one, doesn't get to, doing something differently for yourself. So that's, hence, MPR was designed as a part of a culture of creating a shared purpose, of doing it a process way, OBDCA. There has to be upward spiral of improvement, of innovation, and make it a habit. So, and we realize that nothing begins unless we start putting it into action. So just make a structure around it and make it happen what we need. So that's our practice. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share this. It's something which we are really proud of. And it's a pleasure. If anybody else, anytime wants to understand more, we are more than happy to come and invite you to our MPR classrooms and give you a visualization of how this process works. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishu. In fact, that was she did a mistake. She actually let out some great secrets. So some of us who are not using NPR will start using NPR. But the interesting thing I'll tell you is, when she talks of, these fact sheets and all, and when we try to relate it to enthusiasm, and we try to relate it to innovation, one thing which I feel very strongly is that this aspect of sharing is also something which is a part of enthusiasm. Whether the departments within themselves, they share amongst each other or not. I can see a gap in somebody else's department. Do I go there and put a yellow sticker there? Yes, there is a gap there. I can help you in solving it. This is what is real enthusiasm. Do we really foster this? I think Canon has been able to do it. And they have been able to do it pretty beautifully. That is why people feel empowered and they have been in the organization and attrition rates have come down. Processes have improved. And probably I think market shares would also improve. So turbulent times can lead to different things, but then the ways of addressing it would be in every organization will have its own way of doing it. And thanks a lot, Ritu, for sharing all that with me. And we'll have some question and answers after that. Now I come down to the most dangerous aspect of this session. So we have Larry. Now, I know him, I think that's, 24 hours? I know him 24 hours. And probably, he has a unique way of influencing people on the phone. So I was talking to him, he influenced me and he touched me in my heart straight. And somewhere there, there was a bell which rang on both sides. And when he walks in today morning, he said, "Hey, you are AMB." I was surprised. So, he carries with him immense experience. He has actually worked globally in different organizations in different sectors. Right from curriculum development to training, to health, to eye care. And probably, I don't know whether he's aware of Vedanta or not, because whatever he says is purely from the science of Vedanta, from our scriptures. He talks of mind, body, and the soul. He talks of higher purpose. And it would be really fascinating to listen to him, because he has come with some huge documents. I think he'll share it with us. Larry, please.
I'd like to meet this man that he was describing to you. It's a pleasure to be here. You put my glasses on as the senior statesman in this room. I came to Soil for the first time 3 years ago, and I was so taken by what I saw, the faculty and the students, that when I knew I was going to be in Delhi this week, I thought, well, I'm on my way to Nepal, I'll delay a few days so that I can just tuck into this conference and help celebrate the 5th anniversary of this wonderful institution and school. Little did I know that word would get out and I would be invited to be part of this panel. But I must tell you that I have been excited to come and meet with you this morning. I can't help but show my enthusiasm because I think both the topic, the school, the institution, those of you that have come as participants in this conference, all of that inspires me to want to go on for another at least decade in the work that I'm doing. And I'll say God willing. So I want to thank Anil Sachdev, the faculty, the students. I also, I guess on a sober note, want to acknowledge the families, both here in India and in East Africa, that have been touched by the tragedies of the recent weekend. I know such tragedies are not new to India. I was here when the Mumbai hotel was attacked. I've been in East Africa when the U.S. Embassy was bombed. It is part of the turbulent times, as you said, Professor Acharya. And somehow I felt I need to acknowledge that because it is part of the space that we are in this morning. I won't dwell on it. That's the good news. And when Professor A&B said that it's a bit of a dangerous leap to invite me to stand in front of you, he was telling you the truth. My perspective is different than my colleagues. You'll note that. You probably sensed that already. I'm not coming to share with you what secrets I've learned from life in the corporate world. I did serve as a consultant. I was telling both Mr. Krishna and Ms. Rita this morning that after about 15 years in academia, I grew restless. And I thought, well, I wonder what really goes on in the real world. And I thought I'd better go find out. So I crossed the road, dangerous as that was, into the private sector and called myself a business consultant with actually very few business credentials. But I was very curious about, I knew that people drive profits. I knew that people were the most important resource. I sensed that they were largely underutilized. I didn't know it. So I thought I must go and look firsthand and see if I can learn about how the corporate sector, the private sector, can achieve breakthroughs and can innovate, and what it would take in terms of human resource programs to foster that. I survived. After about 8 years, I quickly retreated to academia because I love students. I love being around the enthusiasm for learning. I enjoy teaching. So I continue in that vein as a consultant and as a teacher. This topic intrigued me, Professor, fostering innovation through enthusiasm. And I thought, well, that's a curious thing. Surely innovation is about something other than enthusiasm. And I decided I'd better unpack that a bit for myself. So I'm going to ask you to drill down with me. The first thing I did is I phoned my daughter in San Francisco, where she is a recruiter with a company called Tesla. Some of you may be familiar with Tesla. It's an innovative company for sure in the US, working to bring electric cars to the marketplace. She's been working there about 6 months, and she told me that every Sunday night, she actually gets excited about going to work Monday morning. And I thought, well, as her father, I best find out what this is about, because I've not heard this from her. She's 31. She's a bit older than your daughter. She's worked for Microsoft. She's worked for Amazon. She's worked as a recruiter for Expedia, all companies in Seattle, my home. But something was different, clearly happening for her, that she would tell me she's excited to go to work and thinks about it Sunday night. I can't give you the details of that in the very, very thorough and eloquent way that Ritu did, and the way that Mr. Krishnan shared about his company. But I'll try to touch on some of the highlights. In asking her, why are you excited to go to work? What is it about the environment? What is it about the culture at Tesla? She said, well, for sure, the CEO has set a direction. He has certainly set some very high goals for the company, and that ideas and people in the organization are encouraged to bring forth their ideas. And she feels very much like her whole self is welcomed. Her ideas, her experiences, her past, her passions. Because these electric cars, like many automobile manufacturing plants, are nearly totally assembled by robots. I pictured that somehow he was fiddling with robots when he was at work. He said, my job is to come up with ideas for how to improve the manufacturing process. He said, even little ideas, if we can save perhaps 3 seconds or 5 seconds in some part of the manufacturing process, then my job is to propose that idea. Now, this is after he had only been working there 1 month or less. I thought, this is quite interesting. The CEO, Elon Musk, has clearly set out to foster innovation within this company, to recruit people who are not afraid to bring their ideas forward. And some of the things that Ritu just spoke about, and Mr. Krishnan as well, seem to be alive and well in this company, Tesla. So when asking the questions about where does enthusiasm live, where does it spring forth? In you, in me? I think if I ask that question to you, where does your enthusiasm, where does it come from? Where does it dwell? It clearly is a matter of the heart, isn't it? It's the inner world, it's the internal world. It seems to be that that's the place of core values, of aspirations, dreams, intentions, commitments, all that at least. Then I asked myself, okay, well, if that's where it lives in us, resides, what fuels it? What ignites it in you and in myself? And I think therein is where the interaction with the external environment, the kind of things that Rita described at Canon, that are embedded in the company, the kinds of strategies, policies that have endured 127 years in Mr. Krishnan's company. That's where the leadership, the management structure, the reward system, all of the organizational culture play a critical role in not merely fueling, but igniting and sustaining that enthusiasm. Leadership clearly can point the way, as in the case of Tesla, Canon, DARPA, and I would submit that it must point the way. I want to comment on a study that I read about in thinking about what I wanted to share with you this morning. It was a study done by a man named Bob Anderson, who's a consultant in the U.S. He worked in many years in HR. He looked at 100 companies that had initiated major change projects over the recent past. And he found a rather startling thing. He found that in 85% or 85 of those 100 companies, the change efforts did not result in either major achievements, results, nor sustainable results. 85 out of 100 companies had a success rate, or I should say, out of the 100 companies, the success rate was nearly 15%. I was startled by that. Now, maybe being a psychologist and certainly being a hopeless optimist, I thought surely that we're getting it right at least half the time in terms of change initiatives in organizations and corporations. But in fact, in Bob Anderson's study, the success rate was only 15%. So then naturally I asked the next question about, well, why do change efforts fail? And in his examination or his inquiry into that question, he found something very interesting, maybe known to many of you in this room. He found that in those instances, in those companies where major change initiatives failed, that they had ignored crucial variables. And this is where the domain of the personal, the individual, if you will, the emotional, the matters of the heart, where people's core values, aspirations, dreams, where that matters a great deal. What companies have done in large measure is they have focused on technological changes to the neglect of the personal domain of individuals. And it's not surprising then that change was not sustainable or did not take root. In the example that Ritu just shared with us, it strikes me that while it's a very elaborate process, it seems several things stand out. Individuals and ideas, fact sheets, sharing, as Professor Bhattacharya pointed out, all of that would seem to encourage, instill, empower individuals to take ownership of their ideas and feel like they can be a part of change. In those 85 companies that failed, it seems that was overlooked. We know that systemic change is exceedingly complex, not just in turbulent times, but even in times of smooth sailing. And we know now that the crucial variables, the emotional and the personal, are extremely critical during these efforts of major change. I came across a quote by Meg Wheatley, and I don't know how many of you may be familiar with her. Probably some of the students have come across her book, which is called Leadership and the New Science. Very interesting quote, and I want to share with you. She said that the ways most of us were taught to think and reason and to understand do not give us the means to make wise decisions during turbulent times, times of rapid change, times of increasing complexity. We are not generally taught to make sense of the chaotic world or a worldwide web of interconnected activity and relationships. I said to Professor Bhattacharya on the phone 2 days ago that I feel grateful to have lived long enough. I'm approaching my 7th decade. It's not today, Mr. Christian, but in a few months, I will reach my 70th birthday, and I'm damn grateful to be alive. Not only to be here with you today, but to have lived long enough to have seen the emergence of something called emotional intelligence, to have seen the realization that people are underutilized in organizations, their ideas have been underutilized, that the very personal domain of dreams, aspirations, intentions is probably what fuels, really truly fuels, not only enthusiasm, but the willingness, the courage to innovate. I hope to live a few more decades to see what's coming next. But in Meg Wheatley's quote, there is a sobering reminder that for most of us, our educational systems, our formal training, has not prepared us to live in this turbulent world, to face chaos and uncertainty and complexity. What makes soil, in my mind, a place worth keeping an eye on, and a place that I admire, because I believe formulated an educational set of programs to, in fact, help students deal with chaotic times. So, can we do a better job of initiating and leading change efforts and achieve better than a 15% success rate? Absolutely, and I think our two speakers on this panel before me have shown us the way and given us some ideas. I guess I'd like to wrap up my comments with another quote. This one is partially manufactured by me. I read a few things and then I stopped to think about what they meant to me in preparation for being with you this morning. And what stood out for me is the clear sense that it is time for us to expand our ideas about the legacy that we want to leave behind. The legacy as leaders, the legacy about what we even hold, what we intend for our companies and organizations. And to expand our ideas beyond the creation of a great company or a great organization, to include a legacy of global welfare, a world that works for everyone. And that may sound grandiose to you, but I promise you that when Anil Sachdev began talking about soil 6 years ago and launched it 5 years ago, the very idea of the School of Inspired Leadership sounded grandiose to people. One of the speakers this morning talked about that cynics then and maybe even now would question, what on earth is someone thinking, calling a school of inspired leadership? But in fact, that's what is called for. And I suggest that we need to expand the very concept of what we consider a great company, a great organization. We need to expand our definition and our view so that it includes sustainable returns both in terms of money and in terms of meaning. A greatness that benefits shareholders and the environment. A greatness that achieves breakthroughs in service technology, and in the lives of those individuals associated with the company or organization. Lastly, I would ask you, are we up to it? Heretofore, and certainly when I started my career 45 years ago, being profitable was enough. And it certainly is challenging enough in these times. We saw in the chart of Cannon the lean years in that one table. But I submit that in aspiring for a world that works for everyone, and the sobering lessons coming out of Nairobi and elsewhere surely point out the fact that we do live in a world that does not work for all of its inhabitants. But in aspiring for a world that does, then I think the challenge is to build organizations and companies that have an expanded definition of what it means to be great. It clearly goes beyond the mere bottom line. So I ask you, are we up to it? And I hope I hope your answer is yes. I hope that's why you're here. Lastly, I don't know how many students are in the room. I'm going to do something that's very teacher-like. Forgive me, students. But would you show me your hands, how many students? All right, well, if I may, I want to just say a couple of last thoughts to you. I was thinking about trying to put myself in your shoes today. First of all, I salute and I acknowledge you for being here at Sawyer. I think you've chosen wisely. I also salute you for wanting to make a difference in the world, because you wouldn't have selected this program, this school, if you weren't inspired by that. And finally, I want to say to you that there are two, I guess, pillars that I would urge you to hang on to ground yourself with. One is the pillar of inspiration. And that inspiration is a matter largely of the heart. It comes from your dreams, your aspirations, your hopes, perhaps the way you've been raised by your parents, your culture, and the wonderful lessons that have come out of India all these years from great teachers. And I submit that it also comes from the divine. You may have different words for that, and I'm not going to try to speak very much about the divine. That's a domain that I acknowledge, but I cannot articulate much about. So, inspiration clearly is one of the pillars. The other pillar is aspiration. It's your dreams. It's your hopes. The speaker this morning upstairs was talking about chasing your dream, and spoke of Neil Sachdev as an example of someone who set out to chase his dream. Well, the students in the room, and I don't exclude the rest of you, I hope that you have dreams that you're willing to chase and willing to persevere, particularly when the tough gets going, when the tough times come. Your aspirations are what you brought with you to soil. Nurture them, grow them. You have a faculty that will help support you in that. And lastly, never give up on them. Never give up on them. They are what sets you apart. They are what the world needs. We need your leadership. We need your ideas. We need your inspiration and your aspiration. And I thank you.
A beautiful tip, 2 pillars, inspiration and aspiration. One thing which he said was, in fact, I immediately recollected, something which we are almost on a daily basis we practice at soil. Listen to the heart. So inspiration is you have to talk to yourself. And in fact, most of us in this, I would call it turbulent times, we do not have time to speak to ourselves. So what we do is, we keep listening to others, and then suddenly, when you realize that I need to talk to myself, the time is gone. So you have probably wasted a huge amount of time, and now you are probably thinking of making up with some other way. Another interesting thing which probably I think is food for thought is, most of us, we do not even know what we are really intending to do in life. This is something which is probably a malaise which India faces, because the education system is such that people do not even know what they are really enthused to do. So they pursue something which probably the society wants, their peers want, their parents want. What they really want, they themselves do not know. And, Larry, you'll be surprised to know, I've been interviewing students for this school, and many of them say that they're engineers, they've been working in some software company. When you ask them an honest question, okay, tell me if you had not been an engineer, what would you have been? They come up with all sorts of answers, right from a dancer to a painter to an economist. They say, I became an engineer because my parents, my society, my friends, my colleagues, they were going there. Somewhere down the line, the conflict starts happening once they are, say, 5 years in the job. They start realizing that this is not what they wanted to do. And that is where they start looking for inspiration. They start talking to their heart. They know that, yes, probably we have done something wrong. The sooner we actually rectify the damage, the sooner we come back home, I think it is better. And I think that is something which is really, really great. We should all start, even at this, my age, I in fact try to listen to myself and try to do things which my heart says yes, because that is what is real enthusiasm. One more thing which I wanted to share, which I actually culled out from all the three fantastic speakers here was, we can't deny the fact that ultimately we are going to go into the corporate and we will have to work there. How do we see to it that we identify people who have enthusiasm and probably that enthusiasm is aligned to my organization's value? Because, incidentally, turbulent times, they do not come by giving us a notice. They will be there, suddenly one fine morning you will find the stock market has gone down, your market capitalization has gone, suddenly the bankers raise their hand, here the competitor comes in, the market share is going down, all these things are happening. We need to have people within the organization who can immediately take on the challenge, align themselves with the organization value. This is a challenge which I think most of the HR people nowadays face. I think that is also one area which probably at some point of time we should discuss and debate. How do we see to it that identifying and taking people, there are tools and techniques, those psychometric tools where we try to identify those traits and behaviors. But are they really addressing the type of turbulent times we are looking at and the type of enthusiasm we are actually looking forward to? Maybe that is something that we can leave for maybe the discussion that we will have subsequently. This is a question and answer session now. I think some of you could have a few questions. So I think we can take a couple of questions. I would suggest if people who have questions, they can direct it to the panelists they want to address. And probably, we'll have a 10-minute question answer session. So yes, Mr. Shaunak Shukla has a question. Can somebody give him a mic, please? Okay, you're loud enough. Okay.
Yeah, my question is for Ritu.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Saurabh Shukla, and I'm doing business leadership program at SOIL. We covered organizational behavior in our first term, and it has been one of my favorite subjects. I saw that you are pursuing your PhD in organizational behavior. So you are into process improvement and process engineering, which involves a lot of change. And what we have learned and observed is people are reluctant to change. They are always resisting change. So which motivational theory from OB do you apply to motivate people during such processes, and why?
When we wanted to implement MPR, I think the first step that we said was to change the concept. Because unless we realize that, because it's really, it has to be self-directed. What we believe the Sanji spirit has to be self. We can't really, unless people, so our belief was that unless people realize that they need to change, they will not change. So that's the reason when we get small groups of people and ask them to create their own fact paper, and when they realize the gaps and when they understand the purpose that which is shared, that's the time it acts like an eye-opener for them. And what they change is something like so there are maybe some people who actually it's a lifetime changing movement for them when they saw it happen. So they went on to create these fact papers for not just office but also for their families back home, and they realized that what were they doing all these years. So it's really about the first step for us was to change mindsets and said we can't be always blaming others for the situation in which we are. So how can we change? So if it didn't address that, because a fact paper helps a person when you're putting those evidences, and then it's a realization that what are the gaps. So nobody else will tell you. So when I made my fact paper, I was embarrassed. So, and that's the time when I said, okay, there are lots to do. Not everything is fantastic.
Good mindset. Yes.
With employees on the creative thing and others. To identify those employees to whom you need to give the training, or you give to all the employees in your office? All the
So we started with the top. So the first batch was the top management team, the senior leadership team that we prioritized. So we kind of, our plan is to cover the entire organization. So when the newcomers come, they go through MPR. So once the entire company is covered and it really becomes a habit for the entire company, that's when the revolution on the collective, voices or the same messaging becomes important. So we need to have the same conversations happening in the company.
So it is basically a development center.
Sorry?
Is it basically a development center that you're taking a training and development center or such a training?
So this, you know about MPR specifically, right? So MPR it happens in the classroom, gets tested back, when people go back on their, so after 1 month, when they go back, they implement, they face hurdles, they come back in the third month, in the classroom again, then go back, implement, come back. So they keep going back and forth in the classrooms many times. Finally, when the final presentation happens, the CEO comes and definitely comes and has a look and sees for each individual how is the transition.
Okay. Any more questions? Mind, body, and soul. Yes, come on. Yeah.
Hello, sir. First of all, I would like to appreciate you. We met at the elevators and it was a wonderful meeting. I felt awesome because it almost felt like, we have been meeting for so long. It did not feel like it was a first meeting. Secondly, since morning we have been talking about people being cynics of something you want to do or an innovative idea, and you also spoke about people become cynics, about your own idea. So when do you exactly know that a person is criticizing you for your good, or he's just being a cynist?
Good question. And thank you for your acknowledgement. How do we know when someone is... I'm going to repeat the question as I heard it and understood it. How do we know the difference when a person is being critical of an idea that we are putting forward? Maybe it's merits, perhaps the evidence supporting it, or when they are merely exercising their cynicism, which I was imagining to be a more typical behavior, ongoing behavior. The first thing I would say is that we need the cynics. As uncomfortable as they may be, we need to hear the doubt, maybe the resignation that does exist within our organizations or our companies. There are people who feel their dreams have been thwarted rather than supported. There are people who feel like they've not been able to fulfill their aspirations in their organization or your company. And sometimes that comes across as a kind of cynicism or resignation. What I try to listen for, and I'm not able to do it, I must say all the time, is what's beneath the cynicism? Is there a thwarted intent? Is there a dream that's gotten hijacked or has gone off the tracks? That's one thing that I had learned to do. Sometimes it's hard to keep listening, particularly if I don't like what I'm hearing. But I want to give that to the cynic or the critic, because quite possibly somewhere there may be a kernel of truth that I haven't thought about. So I do endeavor to push in the clutch of my own judgments and listen and hear that person out so that they do feel heard. And look for what might be that kernel of truth, or maybe the despair or the resignation. That if I could somehow find out what dreams they brought with them to the organization. I've worked with doctors many of the 45 years of my career, and believe it or not, quite often I meet medical doctors who have lost that aspiration. They started pursuing a career in medicine. And I think over the years, I've learned to listen and ask questions to try to uncover, what was it that attracted you to this field in the first place? Professor Bhattacharya used the example of students that he interviews who might have pursued an engineering career and discovered that it wasn't for them, that their dreams or their aspirations were in quite a different domain. So I would say listening and hearing them out is perhaps the first most important rule of thumb. And be prepared to hear something, that might uncover for you a truth or a piece of truth, or maybe just even a basis for empathy for this person who, as I say, may feel important.
Yes.
Valerie is my name. I have a question for Dawar and for Mr. Krishnan. Happy birthday. Your attrition rate intrigues me. And my question has to do with that. Being HR and knowing that the social fabric is changing at such a rapid pace, especially here in India, and given the fact that you come from a certain legacy and way of functioning, accordingly how you must have defined your JD, etc. And the minute you try and enforce a new innovative idea or practice within HR, before you can enforce it, it becomes obsolete. And so, how is it that you are finding the anomaly? And what is it that you are doing for employee engagement to ensure that you are ahead of the times and you're truly innovating, that it's innovation enough to engage?
Yes, whenever you have to drive a change agenda, something different, something innovative, it's not easy. Whether it's an HR policy or process, or it's a new product development, or whatever. I think the goal there of Mr. Peter Drucker is very relevant there. If you want something new, you need to stop doing something old. So, typically, when you talk of something new, or innovative idea, or change, why do people resist? They resist because there is a comfort level in what they are doing now. What you are asking them to do, they don't know. You are asking them to move from a known to an unknown. So the first thing is, people will believe in you. What I'm saying is not a bit esoteric, but it's very important. What is their own personal equity and branding in the organization? Do people perceive you as authentic? Do people perceive you as someone who's fair? Do people perceive you as someone who doesn't have an agenda? And do people perceive you as someone who's trying to change something for the larger cause of the organization and people? If people fundamentally believe in all these aspects of yours, chances of your getting listened to is better. Second, when you are trying to drive a change agenda, it's very important to share what are the likely benefits we get which we are not getting now. What are the likely pitfalls also for which we need to guard against. Third, the most important thing is the change affects or the innovative idea affects a lot of people. It is important that all people who are going to get affected by that innovative idea, they are called to the discussion table. A very, very open discussion is held. There is high level of transparency. And everybody is given an opportunity to give his idea, his input on the whole thing, so that there is an ownership. People feel that we have created this together and not a change has been thrust down their throat. So, and as an initiator of a change agenda, it's important for you to bring to the table why you feel that way, what do you think about it, what are the benefits. It's equally important to listen. It's equally important to figure out what are the concerns of others, what are the better things that they talk about. Lastly, in a very modeling perspective, whenever you're trying to bring out anything new, anything innovative, there are broadly three types of people the way they respond. There are early adopters who are sold on your idea and they will jump at it. They are there behind you, rallying behind you. Then there's another group of people who are fence sitters. They are unsure. They probably want evidence. They see merit in what you're saying, but not sure about it. Third category are what I call the tax fighters. They would have dug their holes, they would have got inside, trained their guns, or occupied the highest peak points, and you put your head out and they are out to shoot. So it's important that you need the third category of people. They are typically in the minority. The majority are the sensibles. Again, the believers are again. So you first talk to the believers, and at least you have more people having the conversation. Then try to talk to the people who are sensitives. You may not be able to unleash the entire change in one shot. So you do small changes, show results, build belief. And some of the sensitives may jump to your side. So once you start creating a critical mass based on objective evidence of what you are trying, it is like then it has a snowballing effect. Then there are more and more people who are willing to join. And the voice of people who are believing starts increasing, the voice of people who say we don't want it starts increasing. Having said that, you can't totally ignore the people who are not with you, the last 10%. Because if you don't take them along with you, they will either feel left off, they will try to show their importance by stalling it, or if they are extremely resentful about the whole thing, they may even try to sabotage it. So at a minimum, you need to work towards that. Even if they are not supporting it, they will at least not block it. So it's not easy. You need to carry, but the person driving the change agenda, his own brand equity in the system is of utmost importance. Otherwise, I mean, the rest of it, because people look at your past practice, people look at what you've done. People are perceptive. That's what probably differentiates human beings from not that we are perceptive. We can pick up signals like this. So therefore, what people perceive about you, what is the image they carry about you, what are the kind of footprints and fingerprints they have left in the system are very, very important. So I broadly answered.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. Thank you, Pallavi. But we are slightly behind schedule, and as some of you will be familiar about the formats that Soil follows, we have an open space, and we probably will have around a 15-minute open space discussion with all the three panelists. So maybe the whole group can divide into 3 groups. The students can be split into all the 3 groups. Rest of them can group into 3, and one of the panelists can join one of the teams. I think a 15-minute discussion, and one of the team members, maybe one of the students, can give a small wrap-up of what they have discussed in that open space. And then we have the closing ceremony. We're around a half an hour delay, but then I think we will wrap it up in the next half an hour. So, can we have can you help us in actually dividing into 3? The students can split into 3 groups.
Team itself is a piece. So we said, okay, now the visualization plan, check it out. Objective plan, check it out. So objective is what you're supposed to do. The goal, the plan is how to do it, what, when, where, why, how much, then whether it's happening or not happening, check it out. So when we said, okay, let's move on forward, and then see manager's factor, but it's different from the it needs to be let get. And that's when he said, we'll create this in a pipeline. We could have probably done it on an Excel sheet. That's how we want to create something very, very simple.
I'd like to work from home this morning. So, how to bridge this what seems to be like a significant direction. The first thing is, I guess maybe this is a recently my daughter went to work in a test, and one thing she's been at Microsoft. expedient. Very successful.
We started creating a team. When we started interviewing people, we spoke to candidates from Google and things like that. Many of them were not even interested in the things. It's okay because I treat every interviewing process as a learning process. So at least, I mean, one of the things I would say is the whole idea should be, we made a very valid point of things like changing. I think the crucial thing here is learning to learn. So, when you start learning, when you say, I need to learn this, there is something happening around me, I am not aware of this. If I don't get a grip of it, it's going to have a file out. So, you start getting it. Talking to people.
How this, for example, if the problem is
I looked around the table when I had the lab, but nevertheless, how do we bridge the gap between ourselves and the younger generation? You know, I'm looking at you, chuckling. I don't know what it means. I don't know what statement this is making, and I have to acknowledge my own visual strategy. So I've got to lean in and allow this human being to be precisely who they are, in spite of the decoration, which to me, I'll just say it looks unnatural. It looks foreign. So don't be distracted by the appearance of habits that look different than your generation. As best you can, hang in there and look past the tattoos. Think of me and say,
itself will give birth to innovation. The crucial thing is learning to learn or unlearn so that we can capture knowledge, and two important aspects are communicate and connect. This will make knowledge go viral and many people will benefit out of it. In today's scenario, we have become data-oriented and taking decisions based on number crunching. The gut feeling is missing here in India. We invest more time in collecting data and less time in working on the idea. So need of the hour is to go by intuition in addition to relying on data.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give her a big hand. This group, the second group, who's the year there?
Actually, to the representatives from Infotech was a generation gap. So they see, they have seen in the last few years this generation gap that's come up, and the perception has been such that the new generation, the generation Y that is there, they're not as focused, and so some of the issues that they discussed was that they're not as focused and they're not as punctual, or like the objectives are not very well known when they come to work. So how do you really motivate this generation? How do you really make them productive in this generation? And something really funny that Mr. Larry said was, he actually had a good laugh and said that everybody on this table looks like they're from the generation Y, and he was the only one who did not look like he was from generation Y. So he found it difficult to understand the question initially, but so he got there in the end, and what he said, what he suggested was the generation gap that's there, and he took this example of his daughter when she started with Microsoft, how the difference really comes only initially, but like later on as your career progresses or as time progresses, you start to connect with your organization. So whether it's a person from a generation X or a generation Y, starts to really connect with time, with your organization. Also, another thing that Mr. Lai said was not to really be distracted by the overt appearances of anyone's behavior. Something that this reminds me of is the phrase that, never judge a book by its cover. And then Mr. Anand Sachdev came and joined our table, and he told us something that when you are really interested in knowing people, when you want to enjoy knowing people, you don't look at the overt behavior. You really get to know what the person really is about. Like, they took an example of, Ms. Lai took an example of this motorcyclist who was hired by IBM, and Anil sir took this example of these two gay men that he was introduced to, and how he had apprehensions initially, but then finally how he came to know them and saw the true potential in them. So it's not really about what generation it is, and it's more about knowing the true potential of a person and identifying the true potential and leveraging that potential.
Let us give her a big hand.
I'm speaking with Mrs. Malhotra, and she, as she mentioned in her earlier presentation, that she is very passionate about management processes re-engineering. So we went back into that and a little deeper into that, going into how it came about and where the requirement was. So what she mentioned, that the requirement arose from the fact of aligning and integrating people's visions and what they're doing with each other, within themselves, and across levels and different kinds of processes. So that's one thing that we spoke about. Another thing which she spoke of was how it's not about a quick fix. You're looking at transforming an organizational culture. And that's where something like this gives you, it creates a form of learning where you're working on actually learning it for yourself. You're not being told where the gaps are. You're being put into certain activities which help you identify those gaps within what you are perceiving yourself to be doing and what others think you're doing and where your goal is, and is that a common goal? Is that a shared objective, and are you working towards it in an integrated fashion? So that's what we basically discussed on our team.
Session pretty engaging, and the three generation of panelists that we have here, I think they all engage with the rest of us in a pretty good manner. I think I was able to do a reasonably good job as far as the moderator is concerned, and I think my job